In this video, we're going to have a look at how to create an invoice in Rhino. So the easiest way is to simply click on the invoice button on the finance dashboard. Brings up a screen and inputs a lot of defaults, including your terms and conditions and today's date as the invoice date. All I need to do now is select the customer. If you've got estimating enabled, it will give you the option to link an invoice to an estimate, but you don't have to use this. In this example, we're just going to do a very simple invoice. If you've got VAT enabled or tax enabled, then this will appear. Alternatively, if it hasn't been enabled, this will be hidden. It copies in your default terms and conditions and your notes. So these are just the default values. Also, if you define terms and conditions on a contact, when you go to invoice.contact, you can have specific terms and conditions for each customer. So all I've got to do now is click on Save, and that's the invoice created. Once the invoice is created, I can preview the invoice. I can just check the layout, and if I'm happy with it, I can then finalize it. This is a really important process. Like a document, it'll have a draft status, but it's not a proper invoice until you finalize it. When you finalize it, it allocates it an invoice number. And it also creates a copy of the invoice down here in Documents. You can now email it to the customer, or you can view the PDF version of it. If the customer came back and wanted a more detailed invoice, you can then go in and add a more detailed breakdown by clicking on the detailed line items. So I can now add line item 1. I can input the quantity. I can add line item 2. And you can also add in expenses as well. They appear as a different group on the invoice. Once you're finished adding the line items, just click on Done. The totals on the invoice are now derived from the sum of the detailed line items. And if you want to click Save, and you can now create a new invoice document. And you can view the PDF. So I now have a more detailed invoice. And if I go back to the finance dashboard, I can now see the invoice. I can always click on this figure and it'll show me all of the invoices for that month. I can click on it and just update it. So it's important to note that you can edit an invoice in this app provided it hasn't been locked. And that's how you create a simple invoice or a multi-line invoice in this app.